At this point, is Dungeons and Dragons easier to play than most board games? I ask that question because certainly being a completionist with poor impulse control with my board gaming collection, they tend to be huge tabletop events. Lots of miniatures, lots of expansions, lots of different places you can go, all options in. And I would certainly have it no other way. But with that presentation, more and more, and I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing, but it's just interesting to see how the idea of board games, role-playing games, and miniature war games or hex-based war games, how all of that is really starting to blur and come together almost to the point where some of these systems, it's hard to tell one from the other. So if we back up to the genesis of advanced Dungeons and Dragons or early D&D, what we see is a number of rules, a lot of complexity, a lot of choices, a lot of options. That fluidity playing a character in a role-playing game, I can take a lot of actions on that character sheet and outside of that character sheet. And it's up to the DM, the Dungeon Master, to resolve them. We can kind of do almost anything we want. And especially if you're playing a magic user, you can break the laws of reality. Now, success or failure, is that a good idea or not? That's put upon the Dungeon Master. And it's up to the DM to resolve that. Even if there's pre-printed modules, a lot of DMs will write and create their own stuff. But even if I pull out a classical module, there's a lot of different ways the players could approach the issue. Now, board games at that time, the idea was, especially if they're fantasy-based, is you want to get a D&D experience, a role-playing game experience, in a very compact, quick, easy to play, without a dungeon master or a GM. So this idea of, yes, I've got a role-playing experience, but I've got this board game that's kind of a light implementation. I can get that fix. It plays quick. It sets up. I don't need a DM. We see this parallel with war games from the time. Initially, war games, especially historicals, were one-to-one miniatures or units, a lot of complex rules, looks fantastic on the table. The idea of board gaming, war gaming, really hex-based war games, old school Avalon Hill, was the fact that you could pull out one of these board games and get that wargaming fix in a short window, an hour and a half, 2 hours, versus 5, 6, 8, 10 of a traditional war game. And you don't have to paint the miniatures and go through all that. Two examples from back in the day that I played like crazy and I still play, Ogre. Ogre, Steve Jackson Games, is this kind of super cybernetic tank. One player gets a tank. The other player gets an array of smaller tanks and infantry and artillery, and you have to defend the command post against this tank. And you say, well, Fritz, playing one tank, one versus many, the Ogre tanks are extremely powerful. If you're into Battletech, think of a behemoth tank times like 10. I mean, just massive tanks. And we debated about that. I pushed that up to the Battletech playlist on my channel, exploring an Ogre tank versus a Lance in Battletech. And I think the Ogre tank would just destroy the Lance in Battletech easily. But this idea I can pull out, I can play Ogre, get that wargaming experience in no time. Another great game, one of my first war games, and still play it, still love it. We never got that reprint, Web and Starship. This was like a 3 kind of alien race empire game. 2 alien races, 1 human race, or from the perspective of the other sides, 2 alien races and 1 normal race. And you kind of developed technology and fought and went through that. And it was really interesting because not only was it a hex-based war game, but it was one of the first where you could play 3 people playing against each other. I mean, you could do head-to-head, one-on-one, but you could play 3, pulling that down. So we had this kind of divide. And when I say simplistic or easy for board games, I don't mean that from a critical aspect. I mean that from that's what they were designed to do. Magic Realm completely broke that. I still don't think I'm playing Magic Realm correctly. I don't know if I will ever play Magic Realm correctly. I would love to just sit down with some Magic Realm veterans in the area, but they're really aren't any and play through Magic Realm for that experience. That's kind of the one board game that, yeah, it's a board game, or I should say it takes place on a board game, but it's really a storytelling game, an experience game that just nothing's been done quite since then. But that is a vlog for another time. Now we have that framework. Now I advance things a number of years. Here we are, decades and decades later, where now if I'm playing a role-playing game, yes, I could do miniatures. I'm playing D&D Beyond, D&D Modern, D&D Next, whatever we're calling D&D these days. Yeah, I could do the miniature thing. I could do the Dwarven Forge, hex map type thing, combat mat, and sometimes I do, being a wargamer and having that. But ultimately, I can play the game theater of the mind and keeping track of ranges and stuff there. I just pop open my books, I pop open the adventure module, bring your dice and your character sheet, and we're ready to go. I find D&D to be kind of not as stressful. Literally, we just set up and start playing. And when we're done, we pack it up and we go. And again, this is kind of D&D without miniatures. D&D without supplements, I should say. Nothing wrong with supplements. Can never have too many miniatures, dice, terrain, all that type of stuff. But board games now, with the expansions and all this stuff and the big box, like setup's like 30 minutes. We got to prep like 30 minutes. And some games, Gloomhaven, no spoilers, I've been playing Gloomy a lot. I haven't played it in a while, but I will say I went through one complete cycle and a half cycle of Gloomhaven. It's not a criticism because you get a ton of stuff in that box. I don't know. At the time, I bought it for $100 USD. I don't know how that's not like a 150 or 200 USD game. Just with everything that's in there, in terms of components, replayability, different missions, different things to explore. Yes, and yes. But just on cardboard and plastics, fantastic. You need an organizer for that. You need some sort of homebrew system or some sort of system to be able to do the Gloomy thing. That's a commitment to set up. That's a commitment to play. Then when we add in expansions and rules, a lot of board games have gotten very complex right now. And I'm not talking kind of games that were at inception notoriously complex or depth, like TI Twilight Imperium. Revised is much better, plays quicker, but kind of old school TI. Or Mage Knight is a current imprint, great example. Still not quite sure I'm playing Mage Knight correctly, but I think I'm closer on Mage Knight than I am Magic Realm. But these board games now, with the rules and the different options, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of commitment. There's a lot of setup. I feel like I'm back to playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Now, if I compare that to D&D Modern, D&D Beyond, D&D Next, whatever, it's been streamlined. You pull it out, you play it. Everything's just a DC. Whatever you want to do, just know the DC, add the numbers up. Here you go. It plays very fast. It plays very efficient. Yes, there are a lot of options. I don't even know how many character classes there are. The last D&D Beyond game I was playing, I've got 2 new players. I've been playing D&D for a long time. I pride myself on knowing most things D&D. I've never even heard of these character classes before. And it's like, well, they've been out for like 10 years. Where have you been? I'm like, I don't even know. But that's a good thing. You could play all these different character classes. But again, they all play the same. Pop off my power, pop off my daily, pop off this, pop off that, advantage, disadvantage. It's all been streamlined, condensed, cooked down to a DC check. If you understand that rule, everything else works. So it's been an interesting switch. And what I find with that framework is what got me into board gaming a number of years ago. I think this was around 2008. At that time, I'm doing the miniature wargaming thing. I'm doing the role-playing thing, but I had a switch with work where I was just going to now start working some crazy hours. You got to do what you got to do to advance and take care of responsibilities there and going to school, trying to keep that going too. I couldn't make it to the club. I couldn't play D&D. I basically had from 1 in the morning to 2 in the morning consistently free. And I wanted to keep in touch just playing and playing some games. Now you're like, Fritz, this was a perfect chance to paint your miniatures. And if you're a wargamer, you know, it's like, all right, man, like the next 6 months, I'm committed, work, school, just got to get through this semester. And you know what? I'm going to paint all my miniatures. I'm going to come back to the club and be like, boom, all miniatures painted, converted, based. Didn't quite happen, right? I did buy more miniatures in that time, but I shifted to started playing board games because I could play that experience solo. Role-playing, wargaming. At the time, Runebound, second edition, playing that for that RPG fix with the expansions, and playing the heck out of Space Hulk for that Warhammer 40K type fix. That was how I jumped into there. Now, board games later, I find myself currently, if I want something fast to play, or I'm trying to think of the correct word to capture it, least commitment, quick to play, just like let's get together on a Sunday afternoon and play some dice, roll some stuff, flip some cards. I'm pulling out D&D. I'm even pulling out AD&D, where now if I want to do that board gaming thing, it's like, all right, let's everyone check their schedules. Are we available next Saturday for these 4 hours? And check the space ahead of time because we've got to set things up and explore different things. So what's that going to look like? It's interesting to see how the two have shifted. Now, in your opinion, being a board gaming enthusiast, an RPG enthusiast, a D&D enthusiast, a wargaming enthusiast, what place in that kind of sphere does it occupy board games versus role-playing games? And have they switched where one is a lot more complex and time-consuming than the other?